Again, welcome everybody. It's been such a long time since we've met up again with our webinar series. We took a little bit of a break, but we're back in with energy and new ideas to talk to you about energy and whatever going on in the landscape. Welcome to the first webinar of 2026. And yes, last year we've done a whole series of webinars specifically focusing around the gas landscape in Southern Africa. And this year we have a slightly different twist, but it's all still within the same series of things. So if you want to know more about our previous webinars, we're going to post YouTube links for you that you can follow us and see what it is all about. This year, 2026, we're talking about renewable energy. Now, on our YouTube channel, and I'm going to copy that link in the chat just now, in our YouTube channel, we've made a small video to tell you what this whole idea for this year is all about. We might not have webinars every month, but definitely every second month, we're going to tackle another aspect of renewable energy. And it's not necessarily new technologies that we only want to focus on, but we want to focus on alternatives. We want to focus on how to integrate things, how to have this mix that will make sense, but definitely more in that YouTube video, and also going to share more to you today about all of that. But today we are focusing on before I go there, just remember there's a chat option and a Q&A option that you have at the top of the screen. Again, the chat is for general questions. It's for things that doesn't go right. It's other questions that you have for us and the organizers. Please use that. But if you have specific questions that you want us to handle during the Q&A, things for the speakers, please use the Q&A button and post your questions in there. We would love your questions and we would love to throw it to the speakers. If we don't get to your question during the time that we've committed, we are trying after the webinar to record it and definitely put it on YouTube for you to check later. So just note, if your question is not answered today, within the next month, you're definitely going to see your question answered on the YouTube Q&A video that we will load there. So please, our presenters are ready. They've done their homework. Please ask the question. If we don't know, we will tell you we don't know. But with that, our series, Renewable Energy. Today's webinar, the Just Energy Transition and South Africa's Renewable Landscape. So we're going to start with giving you this overview. Where is South Africa in the renewable landscape? What is all the elements that influence that? What's the fundamentals, the challenges, the opportunities going ahead? And it would be lovely later on in the other series to see how we can get practical and what is out there that we're going to use. Today we have 3 speakers. We are very happy with our guest speaker will be our first speaker for the day. I'm also going to put the bio for you in the chat if you want to know more about Prof. Roula. And she will be our first speaker, Prof. Roula Inglesi-Lotz from the University of Pretoria. She's a professor with economics. Now, Prof. Roula has a very long CV, and I only have a shortened version, and I'm going to give you an even shorter version as I do, but it will be in the chat. And she looks on focusing her research on energy economics, climate policy, energy poverty, and the socio-economic dimensions of energy transitions. She's published many peer-reviewed academic papers internationally, nationally, and her work has evidence-based policy discussions. And we have talked in the energy landscape how the policies influence a lot of the things. So lovely to have someone who's knowledgeable about the policies, but not only the policies, but also look at sustainable and inclusive energy systems. So I get a feel she really looks from a global mindset at the energy in our country and further on as well. She's vice president for the membership of the International Association of Energy Economics. She's actively involved in international research and Policy Engagement, and also the chair for the Just Energy Transition, the perfect person to talk to us about what it is and where it is heading to. Prof. Roula is going to talk about her title of the speech, Beyond Megawatts, an economic perspective on South Africa's just energy transition. With that, let's welcome Prof. Roula to open our series on the energy transition. Thank you, Prof. Roula.
Again, good morning to everyone. You mentioned rainy KwaZulu-Natal, rainy Pretoria as well, so it seems the rain has not left us for winter. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for having me today. Pleasure to join you. It's lovely for me to talk and engage with experts and people on the ground of our economy. We academics don't always get out of these lovely buildings that we have at our campuses to speak with people. Lately, we try to bring people at campuses, so I'm always keen on these interactions. So today I would like to offer a more economic perspective of South Africa's just energy transition and leave you with a few thoughts and ideas. Obviously, within a 20-minute presentation, we can't cover everything, but I want to take you all into the mindset that the just energy transition is technical, is engineering in its heart, but and of course technology, infrastructure, etc. play a role, but transitions and the sustainability and the success of transitions also depend on jobs, on people, on institutions, on policies, on public trust, which I will cover just now. So before I start, just a few words of how we do, how we structure our unit. So the overall unit is called Energy Economics Research Unit. Under that, it's a year now that we are happy to have the bilateral Sarti chair in Just Energy Transition. Why is it bilateral? It's in collaboration with the Aachen University in Germany, where the other half of the chair is sitting. And the idea there is to do research on energy transitions from a just perspective, from an equitable perspective, but also actively impacting policy discussions, etc. So work you see here, and I always make this disclaimer. I'm Greek, and this looks like the Acropolis, but it wasn't the intention in the beginning. If you want to accept my excuse, our work combines, or it is based on 3 pillars: research, postgraduate training, capacity building, and policy impact, policy engagement. We work very closely with government, with industry, with international organizations, and of course we collaborate with academic partners to understand how these transitions can be economically viable. And recently, with the whole idea of just behind it, how these transitions can be socially fair and very importantly, implementable, because there are many things written in paper that do not have any space in reality. So our research focuses on 4 connected themes, and I usually say for now, because it's a very dynamic field that we're working in. Energy transition and structural change, energy poverty, inequality, inclusion, all of these aspects that I will mention in my presentation every now and then. Climate change, climate finance, climate risk, and the 4th, which is actually an underlying theme to all of them, the institutions and governance, or in other words, the political economy of energy. Our work reflects an important idea that energy transitions, many times we hear, and I know maybe the majority of you are from technical background or business background, but many times the energy transitions are presented as technical processes with some social consequences. And what we're trying to show in our work that we can also flip this around and look at them as social, institutional processes with technical components. I'm not going to stay in this graph a lot. I just want to show you the different countries that we try to work with and we do projects with, and you will hear me talking about papers in collaboration with some of these organizations during my presentation. Hopefully, one day when I come back to these webinars and I present, I will have more red dots for our team to discuss that with you. Today's key messages, and I will start with saying that up front, and then you'll see how the story will unfold, and I will come back to that. Energy transitions succeed when people succeed. So technology is essential, don't get me wrong, but technology alone does not deliver transition, because we're talking about jobs, about people's ability to afford the new forms of energy. We're talking about skills, about the trust to the policies, and inclusivity. The second message that will come out from the story is justice is what makes the transition sustainable. If communities, workers, households, businesses, small businesses, and big businesses, regions, policymakers, if any of them feel excluded or harmed, the resistance grows and implementation slows down then, and progress becomes fragile, becomes vulnerable. So we don't want that. Justice is what makes this transition sustainable. Then South Africa can turn transition pressure into an advantage. How do we do that? We need the right institutions, we need policy certainty, we need good channels of innovation, we need to align our investment, and then the transition not only doesn't harm economic growth and competitiveness, but actually enhances. It supports economic growth and competitiveness by creating new opportunities. So, simple question to start with, and I'm an academic at heart, so I start with definitions a little bit. What do we actually mean when we say a just energy transition? A just energy transition is more than environmental objective or a policy objective. It is a shift. It is a fair, or the aim is a fair and inclusive shift from high emission, you may call them dirty energy systems, towards cleaner and more sustainable ones. The first word is just. What does it mean? It means while we pursue decarbonization, we also have to protect workers. We need to support the affected communities and ensure households are not left behind. The word energy in the middle reminds us that this transition must still deliver what every economy needs. And hint to SDG 7, Sustainable Development Goal 7, reliable, affordable, and secure energy supply. Not only affordable, not only reliable, not only secure, not only clean, but a combination of these characteristics to the word energy. And then the word transition, and I've argued that many times that we shouldn't say transition. We should speak about transitions. Because if you think about the way the human race has been using energy throughout the decades, the centuries, it is never stable. We've changed from one fuel to another because of risk, or because of safety, or because of costs, or because of development of technology that pushed us into using something else. So it's a constant transition. It's change over time. And that's why I worry when we say, but how can we achieve just energy transition? Well, it's not an ending point the way I have it in my mind. It's a constant change, a constant adaptation. It's not a single project. Projects are helping, but it's a dynamic process. It's not a one policy decision. It's a dynamic process. Policies should adapt to this. So the just energy transition concept asks not only whether we transition, but how we do it, who benefits, and who bears the costs. And that leads naturally to the new question. What does this include? So some aspects of JET here, and I'll make a summary in the next slide, actually. First, decarbonization, straightforward, high emission energy sources to cleaner technologies. Reduce the dependency on the fossil fuels and bring in cleaner technologies in. Second, social protection. I spoke about the workers. and the communities that may be affected by the structural change. And how do we do that? Reskilling, retraining, transition support, different programs to be more inclusive. Third, economic diversification. We should help regions that depend heavily on one industry to build new sources of growth and development. And for example, and look at who is actually vulnerable, which sectors, which regions are vulnerable, and try and diversify their means of income. And fourth, equity and inclusivity. So ensuring the benefits of cleaner energy, investment and new technologies are shared broadly rather than concentrated to only a few. When these four move together, transition becomes more credible and sustainable. But importantly, transition is even broader than these pillars alone. The transition includes the discussion about the generation mix, but it also requires grid modernization. That's currently the hot topic in South Africa. New capacity cannot be integrated efficiently if the grid is not modernized. Just energy or energy transition also includes electrification of, for example, transport, of industry and households that are not electrified, looking broader in sub-Saharan Africa. It includes discussions about energy efficiency, that sometimes when we speak about the transition, we focus on supply and we forget the demand side, which can be a much faster and much lower cost way to improve outcomes. Also, the energy transition can create new business models. We did not discuss about distributed generation, decentralized systems, and how they're going to work 20 years ago, but now we do. Skills and labor shifts. Skills is a constant discussion in our field. What do we need to make this progress efficiently? And that's where the word just, and you're going to hear me saying that a lot, but the word just has become almost like a given, but it's not. It becomes critical. If workers are abandoned, resistance grows. If regions that depend on fossil fuels are left behind, inequality will deepen. Look at Mpumalanga. If we start closing coal mines there or power plants there, we deepen the inequality between the provinces or within the provinces. So justice is not separate from the transition. It should have been no need to add the word just. It should have been embedded in the word energy, in the concept of energy transition. To measure progress now on the energy transition, it's such a complex thing. Many global frameworks use three broad pillars: people, planet, prosperity. So people, are jobs created? Is energy affordable? Are they included in the opportunities? Then on the other side, we have planet. Are emissions falling? That's what we want, right? Is efficiency improving? Is the clean energy share increasing? And then third, prosperity. Doing all of that without harming growth, investment, competitiveness. On the contrary, create systems that support each other. So from an economist perspective, all three matters simultaneously. Don't ask me to put the one above the other one, because you might have a transition that is green, planet, okay, that is affordable, but people don't like it. So there's resistance from the people side. A transition that creates growth, so prosperity, good, but increases inequality. That will be unstable. The least unstable. So I'm not going to go into details on this report, but that's actually very interesting to see how globally the transition is measured. And that's from the World Economic Forum. They use 43 different indicators scored from 0 to 100. They assign scores to the different countries. And there are three dimensions: security, equity, and sustainability, that all of these indicators are falling under. So what I really appreciate in this report is that they look at the present and the future. So they look at present, how transitioned countries are, but also what are the levels of readiness? Because I might not be fully clean at the moment, but I have the right circumstances to achieve that as we progress in the future. So the country report also looks at the different readiness opportunities. If we look at the 2025 Energy Transition Index, top 20 countries, top performing countries. And if I look at the first 5, first of all, they're neighbors, they're all together there. Sweden, Finland, Denmark, Norway, and Switzerland. I think the only thing that is missing there is Netherlands, so that we close the gap, Switzerland, but lower. What are the characteristics of these countries? They generally have stable institutions. They didn't have major political problems or instability. They have a clear policy direction. They have strong infrastructure. They have much smaller populations than some of the emerging economies. And they have sustained investment. These countries did not transform overnight, but it's more about long-term consistency. And for South Africa and many of the other emerging economies, my feeling is that the lesson is not to copy other countries. This will lead to disaster because the circumstances are very different. But to understand what are the factors that enable progress. And in these countries, these factors are certainty. Policies don't change from one year to another. Capability and execution or implementation. The global map here, and you can go and download the report. It's openly available, and actually the World Economic Forum has a very nice dashboard that you can find the countries, you can look at the maps. The global map reminds us clearly that countries begin from very different starting points. So advanced economies often have more fiscal space, they have stronger infrastructure, they have better access to finance, better access to technology. So if we compare where Uganda and Germany stand at the moment in 2025, we need to consider from where they start. Because developing economies like Uganda and South Africa and others, we face difficult trade-offs. We're talking about unemployment pressures, affordability concerns, shortages, the population that cares about electricity at their house before what type of electricity that will be. And that means transition pathways cannot be and should not be identical across countries. Justice includes recognizing the different national realities. That's where I was talking to you about the readiness, top 5 performance in energy transition readiness. And there's a clear pattern. The strongest performers tend to score well in areas such as regulation, innovation, skills, finance, and institutional effectiveness. And you see South Africa there in the top 5 in finance and investment in their readiness. So we are doing something. There is something there. We're getting prepared to make changes. Talking about South Africa and the introduction about the policy framework, what do we have? So instead of so I have an honor student that she's now master's that did a full map of all the policies that exist that touch on energy in South Africa through the years. But then it becomes essentially a big ball of spaghetti there, and there's no connections, or there are too many connections. So I try to summarize, but create 3 pillars of our policy landscape and base every pillar to one document that is quite important. Of course, there are many other documents and strategies that we don't lack strategies and policies in South Africa. So the Just Transition Framework by PCC, Presidential Climate Commission in 2022, and I would call that the social legitimacy pillar. It focuses on fairness, inclusion, bringing in workers and households and communities and making sure that no one is left behind, the UN motto. Then the second one, the Energy Build Plan. The Integrated Resource Plan discusses and sets out the future electricity mix when it is signed by Parliament and when it is getting in implementation phases, but also gives a hint to investors of where the country is going. And the third one, maybe let's call it the finance and implementation pillar. That's the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan. This is the finance side. It links ambitions to funding, to programs, to practical deliveries. So definitely we don't have lack of policy direction. The key challenge is implementation, coordination, and speed. So if you look at how the JET implementation was structured, it was defined by 6 portfolios. In 2023, so the initial 6 portfolios had to do with electricity infrastructure, specifically the Mpumalanga region and the Mpumalanga Just Transition, new energy vehicles, green hydrogen, skills, and municipalities, which is a big stakeholder in the system. Recently, 3 additional portfolios, the South African Renewable Energy Master Plan, which is all about the industrialization, the green industrialization, the inclusion of renewable energy, the energy efficiency portfolio, and the road to rail portfolio. So, again, good structures. How do we use them? And just to take you now, as I'm closing off with some work that we are doing from the socioeconomic perspective, top right, you see jobs, regions, and households. We've done some work on that, funded by UNDP and PCC, to look at the different provinces and the impact of the energy transition in the different provinces, and the differences are big. Then we looked at gender and inclusion. Women remain underrepresented in many energy sectors. We did some work with the Curtin University in Australia. And it's not that developed and developing countries have big differences when it comes to the energy sector. Women are underrepresented, but new value chains create more opportunities. Then energy poverty and affordability. Can households and businesses connect? Can they afford things? How will that affect climate, etc.? Quite a lot of work on that from the team. And then last but not least, the global economy and geopolitics, how the global coal market affects South Africa's opportunity to transit without losing economically. We can still export our coal, and where does this balance itself out? The critical minerals is a big discussion in our research currently, and the carbon border measures that will affect the majority of the sectors, even though it's targeted to specific economic sectors, but the research shows it will affect the majority of economic sectors when fully implemented. And with that, I think I can close here. The 3 messages I've spoken about: people, justice, and transition pressure into advantage. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that. And my brain is just going crazy with all the information that you've shared. I hope people is going to add some questions in the chat for you. I think there's so much more than we can talk to based on what you said. But that bigger picture and saying, hey, technology is not the only thing that's in the mix. And I know often people are so frustrated. They have the technology, they can't get it implemented. And you're quite right. The social, economic, the political landscape, the policies often have such a big impact on that. And we must rather take hands than all work in different directions. So there's hope for the future with that, and that is very excited. I also love to think what is in our hands, and I think this is such a practical thing that you guys are doing, to say coal is in our hands, let's use it correctly and responsibly. Love that. Thank you so much. With that, we are jumping into our next speaker, Mr. Jurie Steyn. Jurie should not be, it's not a new face on our webinars. It's the first time you join our webinars. It will be a new face for you. But Jurie is one of our OTC directors. He has many, many years experience. He started off as a chemical engineer, but he didn't end as a chemical engineer. He has looked at engineering, sustainability, effective management areas. And OTC, he's not only our chairperson, but he looks at environmental matters, inherent safer design, water treatment, risk management, decarbonization, and of course, new energy. So it's perfect from the OTC viewpoint to have Jurie giving us an overview of and the strategic role specifically of renewable and nuclear energy. And I know Jurie has done a lot of effort to get some of the latest information out there. So what a privilege and honor to ask Jurie to be our next speaker. The strategic role of renewable and nuclear energy by Jurie Steyn. Thank you, Jurie.
Thank you for that introduction, Wilmin. It's always interesting to hear what you have to say about me. Not necessarily all true, and one has to be careful that you don't raise expectations too high before I start talking. Okay, the discussion today is on the strategic role of renewable and nuclear energy in the Southern African context. Why does this matter? We've just heard a presentation, an excellent presentation on the just energy transition and its implications. We know that we have an aging coal fleet, and load shedding has not been on the cards recently, but we've all been through that and we don't like it. There's a rising cost of unreliable electricity supply. There's global pressure for low carbon competitiveness. And there's a need for long-term energy security and resilience. And what the Strait of Hormuz has shown us that domestic energy sovereignty is also very important. What is renewable energy in terms of international definitions? The renewable energy is energy derived from natural sources that are replenished at a rate higher than they are consumed. And in terms of local legislation and NERSA documents, they define renewable energy as energy from non-depleting or low-carbon sources. They link it to socio-economic development. It focuses primarily on solar and wind energy. You know why. And it definitely supports the just energy transition as well. Just in simple terms, renewable energy you get from the sun, from wind, from water, geothermal energy, energy from biomass, and non-renewable energy, of course, your hydrocarbons, coal, oil, and gas, and then two special cases, waste to energy and nuclear, but I'll talk about nuclear a little bit later. Right, energy security in a volatile world. Global fuel flows are vulnerable to conflict, and we've seen that with the Nord Stream gas pipelines linking Russia to Germany. In September 2022, 3 of the 4 pipelines were damaged in an explosion. Nobody still knows who actually caused it, but that shut down the gas supply from Russia. There's the recent USA-Israel-Iran conflict, and if you watch the news, you'll see what the Strait of Hormuz disruptions in terms of a choke point risk. Energy sovereignty. It's important to aim for energy self-sufficiency. When all our electricity was supplied from coal, of course we were self-sufficient. We have very much coal available in the country. But if you look at alternative resources for energy, it may not be the case in future. But if one focuses on domestic renewables and nuclear energy, you can get to sovereignty in terms of energy supply. And by doing so, you will not be exposed to maritime disruptions. Solar energy, well, South Africa has world-class irradiation. And this allows for photovoltaic solar energy. It's currently, and you see the map there on the right-hand side. The redder it becomes, the more intense the solar radiation is. So you see in the Northern Cape, in the Uppington area and so on, lots of opportunity for solar energy utilization. Photovoltaics is the cheapest new build option, and it can be anything from a rooftop installation to very large utility scale installations. Concentrated solar power, the map we show there is a so-called global horizontal irradiation, which is important when you look at solar PV. If you look at concentrated solar, the term they refer to as direct normal irradiance, which is direct impact on your reflective panels. It's more expensive than solar PV, and you require heliostats to accurately focus the sunlight beams on a receiver. It stores energy as heat in either a molten salt or in rocks, which means that your energy storage is automatically built in. It's not like solar photovoltaic where you have to have batteries or another system of storing your energy. Just two examples. On the left-hand side, there's concentrated solar power. It's the Redstone 100 megawatt project in the Northern Cape. And you'll see it's a lot of mirrors reflecting the solar energy onto a receiver tower. And on the right-hand side, there's an example of a 100 megawatt solar PV plant in Katu, also in the Northern Cape. The interesting statistics I read regarding the Redstone plant, I think they have over 84,000 mirrors that has to be focused on that receiving tower. So can you imagine 84,000 mirrors? You have to keep the mirrors clean and you have to keep them focused. In terms of wind energy, we have very strong wind corridors in the Western Cape, the Eastern Cape and Northern Cape. The graph shows it on the right-hand side. Red areas are areas where there's fairly continuous, very strong winds. So the Eastern Cape, Western Cape, and high wind also in Northern Cape. We have high capacity factors in South Africa. And the capacity factor is the percentage of time a wind turbine effectively operates at full power. And capacity factor of anything above 45, 50% plus is exceptional. And South Africa has sites in this range. Wind energy complements solar extremely well. In South Africa, the wind output typically rises in the late afternoon and evening, which is the time where solar energy obviously dips. And also wind peaks in the winter, solar peaks in summer, and together they provide year-round stability of energy supply. Hydropower, we have the illustration here is of a dam. The water in the dam has a lot of potential energy. If you feed that water through a penstock to a turbine, you convert that potential energy into kinetic energy, which in the turbine is converted into mechanical energy, which then in turn in a generator is turned into electrical energy for distribution to wherever. Pump storage, if you have excess electricity, you can pump water from the river back into the reservoir and you can have this system operate as a large and expensive battery. Biomass and biogas. Biomass already provides a significant portion of South Africa's renewable energy, mostly for industrial heat. It could support 300 to 500 megawatts of dispatchable power. And biomass is typically used as a replacement for coal in boilers. Biogas, we've spoken about biogas in last year's webinars on gas, but it's still in its infancy in South Africa. But it could also support 400 to 800 megawatts of electricity generation. And you get a byproduct, digestate, which can be used as a fertilizer. It's not a large-scale grid solution like solar or wind energy, but it is strategic and it can support rural economies. Emerging renewable technologies for South Africa includes geothermal. There's moderate potential in Limpopo, Western Cape, Eastern Cape. It has limited large-scale electricity potential in South Africa. Tidal energy, where you capture tidal movement and use that energy to turn generators. There's modest tidal ranges in South Africa. It's suitable for small-scale or pilot projects, but it's not going to be a major national contributor. Wave energy, the up and down movement of waves. There's relatively strong potential on the west and south coasts. Technology is still maturing, but there's long-term opportunity for diversification. The question remains, what about nuclear energy? Nuclear energy is a low-carbon energy source, but not typically classified as renewable. And one of the reasons it relies on nuclear fission, which uses uranium-235, and that's a finite resource. International bodies generally list nuclear as low carbon but non-renewable, except for the state of Utah in the United States, which have legally classified as a renewable energy source. In Europe, it's classified as a transitional and sustainable activity under the EU taxonomy regulations. If we put all of this together and we look at the technology readiness level, or TRL is a scale of 1 to 9 to say how commercially ready a technology is. Solar photovoltaic, readiness level of 9, it's fully commercial. CSP also 9, fully commercial. Wind also. Hydropower also. Pumped storage, it's done in some areas. Also a 9 readiness level. Biomass and biogas rated as 7 to 8 readiness level. Large-scale nuclear or light water reactors, also a 9, fully commercial already. Small modular reactors, rated 7 to 8. It's commercial in specific sectors. Geothermal, low enthalpy geothermal specifically, rated a 4 to 6 readiness level, which means it's in early development. Tidal energy, 3 to 5 readiness level, meaning it's in pilot stage. And wave energy, 4 to 6, is early commercial pilot plants in operation. The potential for South Africa shown there, solar PV excellent, solar thermal excellent, wind very good, hydropower fairly limited, pumped storage very good, nuclear good, small scale nuclear good, the others are moderate and low. Renewables plus nuclear will give us a very good complementary mix. Coburg power plant currently supplies about 4% of South Africa's energy, and we've seen that the operating licenses have been extended to 2044, and that should be 2045, not 1945. We have the highly skilled people available in the country and industrial capability to operate these plants. Renewables are becoming more cost-effective. There's abundant opportunities in South Africa for wind and solar, as we've seen. It gives you domestic energy production. You don't have to import gas to produce electricity. And together they can reduce import dependence and improve energy sovereignty. Coal transitions to a stabilizing but residual role. And according to the Integrated Resource Plan published last year, the future is nuclear. There's plans for 4 pressurized water reactors of 1,200 megawatts each. The idea is to install these adjacent to the Koeberg power station. And then a fleet of small modular reactors deployed across those areas where coal-based power plants are being shut down in Mpumalanga and Limpopo. Obviously, we have grid challenges. The grid is old, overloaded, and geographically mismatched. And the best renewable resources are far from the load centers. Transmission constraints limit renewable projects. And in terms of the IRP, Eskom indicate that they would require 14,000 kilometers of new lines to unlock the plans of the IRP. Now, what could South Africa's future energy mix look like? And let's say this is a high-level concept of what it could look like in 2050. I say renewables up to 60%, nuclear up to 20% of the total supply, coal still in the mix at about 10%, gas at about 7.5%, and hydroelectric at 2.5%. Conclusion, we have the Integrated Resource Plan. We also have the South African Renewable Energy Master Plan, or SAREM, published last year. Both these plans, in my opinion, show an over-reliance on solar PV and wind and battery storage. I think there are other options that could be utilized that can be a better mix than what they show. South Africa's future must be secure, diversified, and hopefully domestic. Renewables and nuclear will enable long-term sovereignty and resilience. The phase-out of coal, as we've heard from Prof. Roula, it must be just. And the whole issue of gas and shale gas and electrification and so on will be covered in the next presentation. And with that, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Jurie. I always think it's very brave if someone is looking and starting to talk about nuclear, but you did very well there. About 10 years ago, I went to Sterkfontein Dam, and I've looked at their hydro installation, and they were busy doing maintenance on one of the 2 big turbines that they have in there. And it's incredible to look at those big things that they implement. So I understand when you say it's okay for pilot scale sometimes, but not necessarily always relevant for those big installations for a country. But it's quite indrukwekkend, impressive to see what they are doing and how those installations look like. Thank you, Jurie. I know you had a lot to say. You had to cut out a lot, but very, very interesting presentation with that. Our last speaker for the day is Anne-Marie Buck, one of our OTC consultants. Now, Anne-Marie, it was not good enough to only start with a chemical engineering degree. She had to go and do an MBA and a law degree on top of that. So definitely she comes with a different viewpoint and a different approach, but she has 40 years of experience, both private and in the public sectors. Doing a lot of things, conceptual work, commissioning work, but now she focuses on project and business development, especially in the chemicals and energy infrastructure. A lot to say about Anne-Marie, but that's the gist of it. But Anne-Marie, lovely to have you here. First time you're speaking on one of our webinars. Looking forward to that. Anne-Marie is going to speak about energy security and the role of gas. Energy security and the role of gas. With that, thank you. Welcome, Anne-Marie.
Morning, everyone. Today I'm going to speak about energy security and the role of gas in South Africa. Firstly, why does this matter? As far as electricity is concerned, we've all seen the devastating effect of load shedding, with 1 trillion rand being lost since 2007 as regards our GDP. In 2023 alone, 6,000 hours of load shedding were experienced. This is due to aging, unreliable coal fleet with insufficient capacity and low reserve margins. The effect of this is it undermines growth, investor confidence, and our competitive position. Another aspect is also our industrial, we all know we're facing the gas cliff. And without that gas for industry, we stand to lose about 75,000 jobs. So with our coal dominance and limited gas and greater reliance on imports, particularly for oil and petroleum products, we are exposed to price volatility and geopolitics. A further consideration is we rely on the Romco pipeline for the Pandetamani gas, and now with that being reduced in the future, we are really exposed. There have been other regional gas discoveries in Mozambique and Namibia, and they may reshape the regional energy dynamics. But in the meantime, we still need to look at diversifying our energy mix, decarbonizing and building resilience. And a case in point, which you are very aware of, is the Strait of Hormuz, where a choke point is really holding the world to ransom. That no matter what analysis you do in policies and regulations, we are exposed to what has happened globally. This has raised diesel and petrol costs and electricity peaking costs. Also, it's great costs for transport and logistics with an amplifying inflationary pressure. So we are not only affected by local issues with our energy security, but also on a global basis. We have a national electrification plan, which is target is by 2030 that there would be complete national access to electricity. At the moment, we are 95% of the way there with 200,000 off-grid households. We still have 1.6 to 3 million households to connect. And the discrepancy in this number is because of the number of illegal connections and trying to quantify that, and it tends to be a growing number. There's a funding gap of 75 billion required to achieve this. At the moment, we actually need to double the number of connections that are being made in order to commit to reach the target. So we require further decentralized electrification and flexible, dispatchable, reliable energy in the country. So our current energy capacity mix is not balanced and is very open to coal and its aging fleet and low energy availability factors. Wind and solar is growing rapidly, but it needs firm backup. As we've already seen discussed, the nuclear stable baseload is provided from Kuiberg. but that also has had maintenance issues, which had shutdowns over the last few years, and hopefully that is now stabilized. Hydro, we have domestic and imports. The diesel peakers are very critical for your peak periods, but they are high cost, and gas is very limited. So over time, we will see coal declining, although with the transition, it does remain very critical. Renewables will ramp up, but we need to see the support for the renewables ramping up to maintain a stable system. So longer term, we'll have lower carbon, renewables dominate, coal diminishes, and then we need to look to the methods that can support the renewables. Essentially, though, the just energy transition must balance reliability, affordability, and the reduction in emissions. So as we've spoken before, coal will go from a dominance to a supporting role. And this is critical in the short term to medium term to preserve the grid stability. It needs to be a managed decommissioning. So as it's decommissioned as the renewables roll out, but also it needs to take into consideration, which we saw in the first presentation as well, is there are socio-economic issues, there are skills gaps, there are regional consequences as this happens. The other thing I found quite interesting is a few months ago, I was seeing reports that people were mentioning that maybe the decommissioning of coal would actually have to slow down because they saw that load shedding might come back towards the end of the decade. But then yesterday I actually saw another report where the electricity demand in the first 3 months of this year was actually 10% less than what it has been last year. And so that's quite a reduction. So we go back to gas, that it can play a supporting role in our energy needs and provide some of that security. The problem is we have very limited domestic supply currently. So to bridge the near-term gap, it would need to be imported. It could be imported regionally or from further afield, but there's always the cost factor which comes into play. Gas is also very important from the industrialization and economic point of view. So from the industrial viewpoint, our current gas supply is from Pandey to Mani through the pipeline, but that's got a deadline of 2027, 2028, it will stop. Sasol methane-rich gas might come into play from when that stops to 2030. I'm still not sure why it's 2030 or whether that could actually play a role for longer. There are possibilities of small-scale LNG. Renogen is already producing and is going to be ramping up. But that really full volumes, I think only we're talking about 2033. Otherwise, there's a possibility of importing LNG, which will be costly. And particularly with the industrial side, the various applications which are very sensitive to the price. It's also important to get a good aggregate demand to enable imports to be viable, and any infrastructure needs to be constructed. If we go to the gas to power supply options, there's a possibility of LNG supply. Matola seems to be the one which might be the most come into play first. Guessing early 2030s, Mozambique and Namibia, there's also that potential, but very unlikely to be before 2033. There is the development going in terms of the LNG import terminals. Richards Bay, Kucha, Saldanha, they've all been mentioned. from what I've seen in the public domain, it had appeared that Richards Bay was the most advanced. But the latest information is with the Eskom power to gas losing its environmental authorization, that investment decision will only now be made in 2028. So that will push that supply out. Longer term, we do have more domestic potentials. There's the Karoo shale gas, where the moratorium, I don't think it's been lifted yet, but it was mentioned that it would be lifted shortly. There are various offshore gas finds, including Laypad and Brolpadda, but they're long development times. There's coal-based methane in both South Africa and Botswana, and biogas. But with all these long-term issues, it's a long development time. It's funding is required. So in the shorter term, it would be a good idea to strengthen the regional cooperation and work with our neighbours to get a secure supply. So yes, gas does have an opportunity to play a part. It is not renewable, so yes, I am aware of that. But it is something, it can work towards ensuring our energy security. It is an issue in terms of imports. The logistics are expensive, so piped gas is actually the most viable option. So that's something we really need to work for so that we can get this fast ramping and dispatchable capacity. There are issues because execution risk, there have been many delays. The turbine supply now is, there's such demand for them that could be years, and it's very fragmented coordination. And there again, the affordability, the gas price versus what is currently available needs to be assessed. There are also various competing or complementary options to supply this supporting role for our renewables. As Jurie has already spoken about, the nuclear would provide energy sovereignty for the country and a secure supply. We do have pump storage, which has been working well, but has longer development times and need to have specific locations which work for that. And then the battery energy storage systems, they're shorter implementation times. They don't last long, though there are advances in technology, and there's also the issue of the battery materials. Anyway, going forward then from now with our coal-heavy energy system, we need a bridge to work towards a gas-supported, well, not only gas, but some storage to support the renewables. It needs to be done in such a way that it is just, it's not one technology that will provide the answer, but we need to look at various technologies and make sure that it is done in a balanced way and supports the just energy transition. So in conclusion, what is lacking now is the action. There's a lot of talk, but the public and private sectors need to work together. We need the proper regulations, the proper policies, and then do something that will actually have a firm plan to go forward and achieve what we need to do for our energy security going forward. Thank you.
Anne-Marie, thank you so much for that. As Anne-Marie and me have been preparing for this, you're almost too scared to say anything. It's such a dynamic landscape, and the information that you find tends not always to go in the same direction. So there's different opinions. So it's definitely dynamic, which shows we are in transition. If you're not in transition, things stay stable, but here things changes the whole time. But definitely there's some action needed. Absolutely. Thank you for that.